Principles Show daily podcast by In40U.
Okay, so like what if every single government, right, had like a dedicated team and all they focused on was climate action? No more of this back burner issue, no more political football, just teams in parliaments all over, laser focused on turning, like science into actual climate policy.
Yeah.
Radical.
Sounds pretty radical.
Well, that's what the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is kind of proposing with this whole climate action committees thing.
Right.
That's our deep dive today.
I'm interested.
We're going deep on an article from the BRICS joint website.
Okay.
Straight from the 149th Interparliamentary Union Assembly, the IPU.
The IPU.
Big global organization, all about making parliaments, play nice together.
Collaboration, exactly. So their theme this year was harnessing science, technology, and innovation for a peaceful and sustainable future.
Perfect fit, right?
Total.
So this isn't just like some random idea, right?
Yeah.
This is being discussed at like the highest levels.
Yeah.
When you dig into like the specifics of what the UAE is suggesting, it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
This article is all about action, not just talk.
Right.
These committees wouldn't just be like, studying climate change. They'd be the ones actually making the policies and putting them into action, all based on science.
Which is huge. I mean, honestly, one of the biggest things that makes it tough for parliaments to deal with climate change is that they're kind of disconnected from like the actual science.
Yeah.
Funding for research is all over the place. And then there's the whole problem of making that really complex data make sense to, policymakers.
Right. It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but you're missing half the pieces.
Exactly.
So how is the UAE proposing to fix that? They've laid out some pretty specific things these climate action committees would actually do.
Okay, like what?
First off, they'd be working directly with scientists.
Okay.
So decisions are based on the latest research, not just, whatever the political agenda is.
Right, cut out the middleman. I like it.
Go straight to the source.
And it's not just about getting the data, right? It's about really understanding what it all means. The article even talks about the need to have, gender equality on these committees. Interesting. Which is a big deal. It means they get that having diverse voices is like crucial to actually doing something about climate change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of diversity, these committees would also be tasked with coming up with climate strategies that are localized.
Okay.
Because let's be real, the way climate change affects a coastal community versus, say, a desert region is completely different.
Totally. What works for one place might not work for another. This recognizes that one-size-fits-all solutions just don't cut it for something as big and complex as this. It's about, giving local communities the power to come up with their own plans.
Which leads us to, I think, the most important part of this whole thing, collaboration.
Okay.
The article stresses how important it is for these committees to work together with international organizations, NGOs, the whole shebang. Because, let's be real, no one country can solve this alone.
Absolutely not. And that ties back into the whole theme of that IPU Assembly, right?
Yeah, the harnessing science, technology, and innovation for a peaceful and sustainable future.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting because it seems like the UAE sees these committees as doing a lot more than just environmental stuff. They're like key players in global security and development now.
Right.
But how realistic is all of this?
Right.
And if they actually made these committees, what kind of impact could they even have?
It's a big claim, for sure. But imagine if by just like making climate action, a core part of how governments work, we could actually turn things around with this whole climate crisis.
Okay, I see where you're going with that.
Like, what if instead of always reacting to the latest disaster, we were actually, preventing them?
Okay, that does sound pretty ideal. But let's be real. We've all seen these big plans kind of fizzle out before. What makes this one different? And how do we go from like big ideas to actually making a difference?
You're right to be skeptical. It all comes down to, how they actually do it. And the article talks about that. Remembers those obstacles we talked about, like not enough funding and the gender inequality thing? Those are like roadblocks they can't just ignore.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house on like a really shaky foundation. You need a solid base if you want real change.
Right.
So what needs to happen for these climate action committees to actually, have what they need to be effective?
Well, for one, they need money, dedicated funding. And not just like a one-time thing. We're talking consistent investment in research, technology, and getting people the skills they need.
So making climate action a priority in the budget, not just an afterthought.
Exactly. And just as important is making sure these committees are actually representative, That means really dealing with the fact that women and marginalized communities haven't really had a seat at the table when it comes to STEM and having power. If we're serious about tackling something as huge as climate change, we need everyone involved.
Absolutely. We need all the brain power and creativity we can get, right?
Yeah.
And let's not forget, climate change doesn't care about borders.
Nope.
Even if every country, got its act together, it's still a global problem that needs global answers.
Exactly. And that's where this whole international cooperation thing is super important. That This can't be about countries just doing their own thing or like fighting over resources. We need everyone working together, sharing what they know and sharing technology on a scale we've never seen before.
Okay, so let's say these climate action committees get past all that.
Right.
They get the money, they're representative, everyone's collaborating.
Right.
What could they actually achieve?
Well, for one, I think it could completely change how governments see and deal with climate change.
Okay.
By making it part of like the core of what parliaments do, it stops being just an environmental issue and starts being an economic issue, a security issue, a social justice issue,
This is part of everything.
Exactly. And having a dedicated group constantly keeping an eye on things, looking at the data, coming up with solutions, it keeps governments accountable. It makes it much harder for them to just like ignore the problem.
No more empty promises, no more quick fixes. It's about seeing the long game and finding solutions that last.
Right. Precisely. And imagine if other countries see this working and start doing the same thing. Suddenly you have parliaments all over the world competing to be the most sustainable, the most innovative in how they deal with climate change.
It becomes a race to the top instead of a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing the potential here.
Yeah.
But setting big goals is one thing, achieving them is another. How do these committees actually bridge that gap? How do they turn plans into action?
That's where having that direct connection with the scientists comes in.
Okay.
By working directly with them, policymakers can make sure that the decisions they make are based on the latest research and data, which makes those decisions way more effective. It's about making science the foundation of policymaking again.
It's not enough to just talk the talk, right? You got to have the knowledge and the tools to walk the walk. I like it.
Right. And it's not just about the scientists either. Remember, these committees would be working with international organizations and NGOs who are already doing amazing work on the ground.
Right, right.
That creates a direct connection between everyday people, experts from around the world, and the governments, which leads to a more well-rounded way of dealing with climate change.
It's like building a global network of problem solvers, all focused on finding what actually works. But even with all this, I have to ask, is it really possible to get past all the politics and special interests that always seem to get in the way of actually making a difference on climate change?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, there's no simple answer.
Right.
The political world is messy, and those special interests, they've got a lot of power. But just the fact that they're even talking about these climate action committees, putting it out there on the global stage, that says something.
Yeah, it's like we're finally acknowledging the elephant in the room, or maybe the heat wave in the room is more appropriate.
Exactly. And it's easy to be cynical, but we got to admit, some progress is happening.
Right.
Renewable energy is getting cheaper. More people are getting on board with it. Climate activism is gaining traction. And, especially young people, they get it. They know this isn't sustainable.
So how do we take that energy, that momentum, and turn it into something real? Could these committees be the thing that finally gets us there? And even if this particular idea doesn't work out, what does it tell us about where global climate action is headed?
I think it shows that we're realizing we need big, bold solutions. Like, we can't just keep putting Band-Aids on this. It needs a fundamental shift in how we think, what we prioritize, how we govern.
It's about looking past those short-term political cycles and thinking about the planet, about our kids and grandkids, right?
Exactly. And it's not just on governments and those big institutions. It's on everyday people, communities, businesses, everyone, making sustainable choices, holding our leaders accountable, creating a future where everyone and everything can thrive.
It's not top-down or bottom-up. It's everybody all in.
Right. And that's what makes this so interesting, so crucial. We're at a turning point. What we do today decides what happens to the planet tomorrow. But even with all the doom and gloom, there's hope. We have the knowledge, the tech, the power to turn things around. We just need the willpower and the willingness to work together to actually do it.
And that's what makes this deep dive so important.
Yeah.
We're not just picking apart one proposal.
Right.
We're facing the biggest challenge of our time.
It's true.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this. What's your role going to be in creating a more sustainable, more just future.
Because the future isn't something that just happens to us. We make it happen.
That's something to think about. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay curious, and most importantly, stay engaged.